Tuesday, June 23. Welcome to CGN News. The Guyana Teachers Union, GTU, on Monday urged teachers to stay away from school in protest at the Ministry of Education's decision to conduct classes and examinations during the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. The teachers were due to return to classes to assist students writing the National Grade 6 assessment and the Barbados-based Caribbean Examinations Council Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate (CSEC) examinations on July 1 and the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Examination CAPE on July 13. The union said that with Guyana having 154 cases of the virus and 12 deaths, the situation poses a threat to the well-being of all Guyanese whose desire is to remain healthy, and is therefore advising teachers to remain in the safety of their homes. Antigua and Barbuda Prime Minister Gaston Brown is urging CARICOM countries to condemn moves by the United States Senate to introduce legislation targeting Cuban healthcare workers, assisting countries to deal with the impact of COVID-19. Republican Senator Rick Scott had recently introduced the legislation classifying Cubans' humanitarian assistance to countries across the world as human trafficking, and wants to extend punitive measures to countries that participate in that program. Among other things, the Cut Profits to the Cuban Regime Act, which was introduced last Wednesday, seeks to require the Department of State to publish a list of countries that uses government-controlled Cuban medical mission programs, and for the department to consider this as a factor when ranking countries in its annual Trafficking in Persons report. CARICOM countries, including Antigua, have benefited from Havana's assistance, and Brown described the move by Scott and his colleagues Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, who have reportedly accused the Cuban government of participating in human trafficking, as extremely unfortunate. Brown further went on to say that the U.S. Senate will be punishing countries who utilize Cuban experts. The nurses and the doctors who buttress the health service will be classified as a form of human trafficking. Cuban nurses and doctors are a significant part of the health infrastructure of many Caribbean countries, and if they were to force the region to get rid of Cuban professionals, they will dismantle the Caribbean's health system. Brown accused the U.S. legislators of creating a new definition of human trafficking, and that it would have tremendous problems for Caribbean countries. Hundreds of Disney cruise workers have flown home from Barbados. Disney Dream and Disney Wonder arrived in Barbados this past weekend. A British Airways repatriation flight departed with about 262 crew members from Disney. More than 15 repatriations flights have left Barbados' Grantley Adams International Airport over the past 3 weeks. They were destined for London, Canada, and New York. To date, thousands of crew have departed Barbados on charter flights, rescue flights, and repatriation flights. A massive plume of dust from the Sahara Desert, the thickest in decades, is to reach the Caribbean Sea, and some of the dust is expected to move into the Gulf of Mexico and parts of the United States later this week. Saharan dust tracks as far west as the Caribbean Sea, Florida, and the Gulf of Mexico each year, a 5,000-mile-long journey. This particular dust event is unique because of its thickness over the Caribbean Sea. It has the highest concentrations of dust particles observed that region in at least the last 50 to 60 years, according to Dr. Olga Mayol of the Institute for Tropical Ecosystem Studies at the University of Puerto Rico. Poor air quality is a possible impact from the dust that can aggravate those suffering from respiratory issues such as asthma. Air quality was categorized as unhealthy and may affect those suffering from asthma and other respiratory illnesses. Overseas now, Saudi Arabia has banned international visitors from making the Islamic pilgrimage or Hajj this year in a bid to control coronavirus. Only a very limited number of people currently living in the kingdom may take part, an announcement on state media says. An estimated 2 million people would otherwise have visited Mecca and Medina this summer for the annual gathering. In normal times, the pilgrimage is one of the most significant moments in the Muslim religious calendar. but only citizens from countries around the world who are already resident in Saudi Arabia will be allowed to attend this year. The authorities say this is the only way they will be able to make plans for social distancing that will keep people safe. Saudi Arabia has recorded 161,005 cases of infection and 1,307 deaths. It only lifted a nationwide lockdown at the weekend. In one of the world's most congested shanty towns, social distancing is not a luxury people can afford. Dharavi is a sprawling slum in the heart of Mumbai, India's financial and entertainment capital, and appears to have brought an outbreak under control for now. More than 500,000 people spread over 2.5 square kilometers, less than a square mile. 8 to 10 people live together in tight dwellings. About 80% of the residents use community toilets. Homes and factories coexist in single buildings lining the slum's narrow lanes. Most people are informal daily wage workers who don't cook at home and go out to get their food. Since the first case was reported on April 1, more than 2,000 infections and a little over 80 deaths have been reported here. Half of the cases have recovered. The relatively low death toll is possibly explained by the overwhelmingly young population of the slum. Most infected people have been in the age group of 21 to 50 years. Business school researchers and city planners from around the world have studied its $1 billion informal economy and urban dynamics. Private doctors have joined fever camps. The cash-rich municipality, politicians and non-profits have provided tens of thousands of free meals and rations. Bollywood actors and businessmen have donated gear, oxygen cylinders, gloves, masks, medicines and ventilators. China's new security law for Hong Kong envisages setting up an office in the territory to gather intelligence and handle crimes against national security, state media say. The new security law will also override any local laws that conflict with it, Xinhua News Agency reported. The planned law has sparked protests and drawn international condemnation. Critics say it will destroy the freedoms Hong Kong enjoys, but which are not available in mainland China. On Friday, the European Parliament voted to take China to the International Court of Justice in The Hague if the law was imposed. But China says the law is needed to tackle separatist activity, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign elements, and rejects criticism as interference in its affairs. Hong Kong was handed back to China from British control in 1997 under an agreement centering on a one country, two system principle that guaranteed certain freedoms for Hong Kong and that do not apply in the mainland. That's it for CGN News. I'm Scott Wilson. Thanks for watching.